Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. So, pre-construction data lifecycle is a term or phrase that we use for describing the life cycle of the data that starts early in the conceptual phase of a project. And as the design develops, more and more data gets layered onto those original assumptions. At the end of pre-construction, once you've created a GMP, it gets moved into the construction phase and yet more data is added. And once the construction project is complete, we have a final bill of materials, a final construction cost for the project. The pre-construction data lifecycle is the ability to track all of the major milestones throughout the life of the project. And then at the end, being able to bring that back into a central repository so that the next time you start a project, you have all of that data at your fingertips. So that's really the idea behind pre-construction data lifecycle. Yeah, I mean the benefit of tracking is one element of it. The ability to compare your predictions, which is really what pre-construction is about, predicting the future, predicting the cost. And then the ability to compare actuals against that. And the life cycle gives you the ability, even if you were wrong on a project, to learn from that, so that the next time that you put together an estimate or you run some analysis on a project, you have that final construction cost at your fingertips. The challenge today, Melissa, or at least the feedback we've heard from our customers, isn't that people can't do that today. It's that the tools that they use, because they aren't integrated, they're typically made up of a series of point solutions, sort of best-in-class estimating, best-in-class 2D, best-in-class 3D. And the data is captured by those individual tools and not pulled together into one data silo. It requires additional work today. So part of this pre-construction data lifecycle, in our opinion, is the integrated pre-construction technology, the ability to create all of that data that you need to put an estimate, to run an analysis, to do value engineering, to do sub-selection, to build out your crews, to build out your fees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In order for you to get value from that downstream and on the next project, it needs to be stored in a central location, with the ability that you can get access to it. Today, doing that is nigh on impossible. It requires extra time, it requires extra effort that our customers just don't have. So part of this is the ability to provide a simple and easy to use tool that enables them to get done what they do today, but behind the scenes, capturing all of that information in a way that you can have pre-construction data lifecycle. You can very easily look at the variances between iterations. You can point to why specific things changed. And then across projects, you can look at, say, the last 3 projects that you did for historical purposes as one example. But you can also do things like, compare line item unit prices, or compare fee structures when you're working, say, with one owner versus another owner, or one building type versus another building type. So there's a lot of benefits that we hear and that we see to us being able to provide that data and put it in the fingertips of those that need the data when they need it, is really the power of this pre-construction data lifecycle that we see affecting the industry. The obviously, we're a software vendor, and it is something that is near and dear to our hearts, but it is not just technologies that are involved in pre-construction. It really is trying to connect the data flow across the life of a project, from concept through schematic, design development, construction documents, GMP, all of the phases of pre-construction. And then having the ability to move that data into the field. So that's both moving it into your project management tools, and the ability to move those costs and quantities into your accounting tools. So there is an awful lot of technology out there. We're not alone in this desire to provide data. A lot of the big vendors, Procore, Autodesk, Construct Connect, others are trying to do that. So it requires the vendors not just to do it themselves. I don't think it's a technology solution that is viable. People are going to have different tools in pre-construction, different tools in construction, but it does require the vendors to work together so that irrespective of the product, the data can move from pre-con into construction, and then when it gets done in construction, it can come back into pre-con for the next project. So I know that was kind of a long-winded, non-specific, but I do think it's not just Beck Tech working on this. I think there are other big vendors that have a desire to provide the same types of analysis to their customers. Obviously, this is not a Beck Tech has a soup to nuts solution based on my earlier conversation. There's obviously more and more of this integration happening both in our roadmap and in other vendors' roadmaps, so that you can collect more and more data at different phases throughout the life cycle of a project. Specific to the question around details and plans and things being incomplete, that is obviously the nature of our industry. You start with next to no information at the program or concept phase, depending on when you get involved. And at every major milestone, the design team is layering on more and more information. And it is the nature of the beast that you don't have all the information that you want. Some would claim that you even get completed with a construction project and you still don't have all the information that you needed, yet we have buildings that are completed. But specific to pre-construction data lifecycle, if you're able to capture all of the data associated with your projects, you do have the ability to go back and look at similar projects. And even if it ultimately turns out, in my opinion, that the project that you're on isn't exactly the same as those that you're comparing it against, you have a baseline to continue to move the project forward. So, details need to be completed, but the art of pre-construction, the art of estimating, is really the ability to interpret, the ability to predict. Rather than just predicting it and not communicating it, I think the pre-construction data lifecycle gives you the ability to point to other projects and say, hey, we didn't have enough information, but we're going to use and assume the same details that are over here and be able to include those in your deliverables to your owners and to your subs and to the design team. So I think it gives you a repository of information that you can use in lieu of having incomplete information. So I think a lot of people today, when they hear us talk about pre-construction data lifecycle, jump to cost history. It is sort of the natural thing that most of us in the industry think about. Capturing either final completed costs and quantities and be able to use those for data mining and then benchmarking our next project, or capturing major milestones throughout the project and being able to look at trends. So for example, what happens to contingency over the course of a series of projects? We all intuitively have some idea about what happens, but it sure is nice and reassuring to point to specific examples and have that data at your fingertips to be able to justify whatever you're presenting to your owner or your project team. So cost history is sort of the natural one. Where I get excited is things that we don't do today that potentially would add an enormous amount of value. So, some of the things that, jump out would be if you're a self-performed contractor or you're a subcontractor and you're building up your estimate based on crews and productivity rates, being able to compare your forecasted crew makeups and productivity rates with the actuals. And then the next time you do a project, being able to use final completed productivity rates and crews, so that we have more certainty around how we're actually going to staff and build this particular project. Bid day, even if it's not a hard bid, usually contractors are bringing subs on, and they're selecting based on lowest cost or best value, but there is a sub selection. More often than not today, no matter what technology you're using, you pick a sub and you get to a GMP. Whoever was second, third, fourth, however many other subs you have, that information sort of gets lost. It resides in an Excel file. What if we could have all of the bidding history for the subs that we're looking at, and we could look at the number that they're giving us today against the number they gave us 6 months ago? What were their fees and general conditions? What were their specific things in the past that potentially we can ask more questions, so that we can, again, reduce the risk associated with selecting a potential sub. So to me, where I get excited isn't just specific about cost history. Cost history is 100% valuable. I think it is part of pre-construction data lifecycle. But where I get excited is the ability to provide analyses that I believe would add value, and I hear would add value, that we're just unable to do today. Yet the data is there. And to me, again, back to the integration, the fact that you're integrating all of this gives you the opportunity to capture anything and everything. It may not be valuable on that particular project, but on the next project, it may be enormously valuable. And being able to capture it and then serve it up in a way that is both intuitive, easy to use. You don't have to go and search through a network drive and then through a particular estimate for a specific value. You put it at the user's fingertips, is really where this pre-construction data lifecycle is heading. It's not there today. It's tip of the iceberg on what we and others provide today. But I liken it to what's happening around us in the environment. Those that I've met in person have heard me talk about, Amazon and buying history. Amazon uses AI to make suggestions based on my history of interacting with Amazon. Well, I kind of liken pre-construction data lifecycle as the same thing. To start with, we're going to be manually looking for trends. We're going to be manually looking for data within that central repository of data. But over the next 12, 24, 36 months, I see more and more automation being layered on top of it, so that the computer can start to suggest things that we typically do. Suggest a productivity rate and a crew makeup for a particular set of line items. Suggest different alternatives that we constantly evaluate during the value engineering phase. Make suggestions about fee makeups. Based on a particular owner or architect that we're working with. So that to me is where it starts to get really, really exciting. And those that know me, I'm excited about the industry today and the progress that we've made. I'm super excited about where this pre-construction data lifecycle could take us. Yeah, so I'm sure people are listening to this going, but we don't have time to do anything additional, and I think we get that. I hear that a lot. I think if you take a step back, if you're able to take a step back and you look at the activities that we are forced to do during pre-construction, I would categorize them as there's definitely high value activities. Spending time with the subcontracting community, looking for value added alternatives, coming up with suggestions to the design team on the ways of accomplishing what the designers have in mind, but maybe at a lower cost or a faster schedule with more safety. There's a ton of those high value activities. However, we also spend an inordinate amount of time on low value activities. Low value activities you have to do, but they really don't bring a ton of value to the overall deliverable within pre-construction. Examples of those would be counting during takeoff. Spending inordinate amounts of time generating reports to react to different breakdown structures that design teams or owners want. So our belief is if we can provide integrated tools that automate or significantly reduce or potentially eliminate those low value activities, we can free up the time that you can spend more time on those high value activities, more time analyzing, more time comparing. So the overall pre-construction time is likely not going to shrink significantly. It's already shrunk. I see it as the time we do have, it's just going to be split differently. I see it as today, maybe 80–90% of the time we are forced to spend is on low value activities. What I'd like to see happen in the industry is that it gets flipped, where 90% of the time is on high value activities, and those low value activities are minimized. And I think it's behooving on us as vendors to look for ways to significantly reduce those low value activities and provide you more and more access to that high value data that is captured throughout the pre-construction data lifecycle. Yeah, and I don't want this to come across as a plug for Beck Tech. That's really not what we're trying to do here. We're really trying to say we believe us and others are thinking differently around the value that we can bring to the industry, but in specifically around what we're trying to do. We have put a focus on developing integrated tools, and we firmly believe that if we can integrate things that are traditionally done in separate applications, 2D takeoff estimating, cost history, model-based quantification, we have the ability to eliminate some of the risk associated with the manual moving data back and forth between those tools. You know, it's one thing if you do it once. Everybody on the webinar knows estimating isn't typically a one and done thing. Over the course of 6, 9, 12, 18 months, you may estimate the same project 20, 30, 40, 50 times, depending on the number of major milestones, the number of alternatives that you have to provide to the design team. And if you think about the risk at every one of those of introducing error because of this lack of integration, it's huge. The other thing is it introduces inefficiencies. So we have integrated a lot of those activities, and we definitely believe that reduces risk and improves the efficiencies associated with doing pre-construction. That's not, again, a one and done. We're on a constant journey to continually look for ways to reduce those the time associated with doing those low value activities, and we will continue to do that. The second part is how do we enrich the data that is at the hands of our users? So a lot of our integrations with the vendors that I've already mentioned, Procore, Autodesk, Construct Connect, is looking for ways to share data, to move data. So we recognize there are other tools in the space and in the market that our customers use. Some compete with us, some don't compete with us, but they use them. And it's important that even if they aren't integrated into our platform, there is the ability that you don't have to reintroduce that data. And then the last part is that even if they are introduced in another tool, all of that data needs to flow back into a centralized repository that you can data mine. So over the course of the next 12, 24, 36, our roadmap goes out 5 years. There are lots of continue to make things more efficient. There are lots of things around continue to integrate activities and with other vendors. And then there is a big push towards recycling of the data and providing more and more of those analysis tools in that high value activity area to our customers. And like I said, I think the feedback that we've got is that resonates with a lot of people in the industry. Our desire is to continue to bring more value to our customers along those lines.